Hi there, my name is Katy Webb. When Karen asked me to speak to you about my faith, my first reaction was to just say no. And there's a reason for that reaction. Speaking about my faith does not come easily. I have far from a perfect track record with my relationship with God, and honestly, I wasn't raised as a Presbyterian. So my thought was, what would you have to learn from me? I wanted this message to be uplifting and to have a little lesson associated with it, and I know others have done that as well. But that's not quite easy when talking about my faith is not something that I do, and parts of it aren't very uplifting. You've probably seen me in church with my family, and some of you follow me on social media, and others may have talked to me before or after church. Today, I want to talk to you about my story of moving through the three stages of my belief in God: the God of Bible stories, the God of service, and the God of meditation. I was born into a family with strong Christian values. I was part of a Lutheran church and was baptized as a baby. And as I grew up, I found the stories of the Bible and the music of the church to be a strong pull to get me there. I attended a Christian summer camp, and I have great memories of singing around the fire. And I attended church every week with my family as well as a youth group. And by high school, I was attending multiple youth groups, both Wednesday for Club Beyond and Sunday for something called Search every week, as well as singing in the choir. At another church we attended in the past, I had played bells and piano. And as I'm alluding to here, we moved around a lot. And one of the ways that we were able to make friends and get involved in the communities that we were moving to was to be a part of the church. So I've found that for a lot of people, God remains the stories of the Bible from their youth. To me, this meant also that the church and the Bible represented good, and I knew that good people were going to be part of that place. So, like the college student we heard from on Sunday during the Kirk service, I went off to college fully expecting to be someone who attended church regularly. I can remember waking up on Sunday mornings to walk from my dorm to a large Lutheran church on campus. And the church building was truly like some of the cathedrals I had visited while living in Germany. And I found the place to be beautiful and inspiring. During offering one week, I turned in a card asking to become a member, despite the fact that having attended for a few weeks, no one had greeted me or asked me who I was or to be part of the church. And in just a few short days, I received a typewritten letter saying that they were not accepting new members. Now, I would like to think of myself as the type of person who works very hard for what I want and doesn't take no for an answer. And I think if you know me at all, you know that I've always been that type of person. But the fact that this church had not accepted me had a very profound effect on me. I was also attending a very notorious party school. So if you haven't heard, the University of Wisconsin-Madison would give ECU a serious run for its money. So I pretended it didn't bother me. And I immersed myself from then on in football games and the major hurdle of figuring out how to get into a bar while underage. And the Bible stories sure came in handy while I was studying my art history courses. I actually remember that a professor was amazed that I could tell different stories from the Bible during a Dutch painting course that I took. I would only attend church with my parents, and that was only when I was visiting home. And when they pressed me about why I hadn't found a church, I would put them off. Finally, I was direct with them and told them that I just felt like church wasn't for me. I knew that it was going to be a major blow to my parents, and it was. And kind of like the feeling that church was just the stories of the Bible that I held at that time, I also had a feeling as a young person that the church was all or nothing. That feeling extended myself. Either I was good or I was bad. God may be love, but did I deserve that love? If God was good and God was love, well, maybe I was bad. And maybe I had tipped into that bad side and God didn't love me. So, in my own way, I turned my back on God. thinking maybe he had turned his back on me. But God decided to come looking for me. And one night I went out to a late night party. And I know this is unbelievable, but I was walking down the street when a stranger stopped in a car and handed me a flyer for this event, which probably should have been my first sign that there was someone else involved in this. It was the 1990s, and I didn't even have a cell phone yet, but I think nowadays if someone stopped on the street and asked me to come to something like this, I probably would be pretty freaked out. But in this case, I just stuck the piece of paper in my pocket, and I decided to attend. So the event was being thrown by a group that called themselves Mad Love, which stood for Madison, where I lived in Wisconsin, plus love. And during that event, I was dancing alone, and while dancing, I felt the love of God very strongly. I had always attended youth group because I could sing and be with friends, but I had never had that mountaintop experience that some of the people in those youth groups talked about. And I wondered to myself, was this one of those feelings? And why was it happening here? That night, I also felt called to serve by meeting the people of this small group who were putting on these events. And at the time, I didn't know that this small group had a Christian mission. The person in charge of Mad Love was named Dave. And I went up to Dave at the end of the night and I told him that I wanted to help clean up. After I cleaned up, I told him I wanted to help organize other events. And he accepted me immediately, and before long, he told me that I was his volunteer coordinator. We got a larger group of volunteers together, and then another group came and started being a part of our group. And they were associated with a larger Christian youth organization that was a missionary group. So many of them were from other parts of the world, other parts of town. A girl named Sarah suggested that the women of the group get together to cook a large meal on Shrove Tuesday, which, as you know, is also called Fat Tuesday. So we jokingly said we were, all going to eat a whole lot of food. We enjoyed this so much that it became a weekly event, both guys and girls. And suddenly I was learning from Sarah how to cook for 30 or more people, something that I enjoy doing and do often now. And without knowing it, we had started our own youth group. And much like the ones that I attended in high school, there was a sense of community, there was music, and it was really an enjoyable time for me. Instead of Bible stories and songs, we were putting on these large dance events, and we would also serve food at music festivals. So at one, we served over 1,000 meals during the course of a Labor Day weekend, which we paid for completely by donations. And we didn't take a dime from anybody. So this group became a family to me, and we spent a lot of time together surrounded by art and music, and it was a very pure-hearted, wonderful time in my life. Kind of liken it a little bit to being a hippie in the late 60s. So during this time, I still struggled very hard to put to words what God meant to me, partially because I still was only associating God in my mind with the Sunday school God of my past. And when going through a difficult time, Dave and Sarah, who I mentioned earlier and who've been married now for over 10 years, told me that they were going to pray for me. And I can still remember the feeling that I didn't deserve these prayers, or that they wouldn't work for me, or that I should run away. And I look back on it and realize that God had changed for me from that Bible story God to a God who was calling me to acts of service. And that's where God stayed for me for a long, long time. It's for me my go-to when expressing my faith, usually not via words. It's usually through helping people, volunteering, or offering an ear to a friend. A long time passed, and I still didn't think that I could feel God in my life as a constant presence. If I was asked if I was a Christian, I would have told you that I was raised a Lutheran, but that I was not a Christian. And I would call on God, or pray to God when I was upset or nervous. And other than that, it was rarely at any other time. My family, who had been very upset that I had stopped attending church, would say that even though I didn't attend church, that they felt that I was still living up to Christian ideals because of my service orientation in life. I would see signs of God in my life, and I still wondered, though, if it was God or was it luck. And the hymns that I sang when I visited my parents' church and the songs that we sang in youth group, or if I heard them, they still moved me. But was that me being nostalgic or was that God? So I spent 12 years in Madison, Wisconsin, and I felt God again numerous times, especially around big decisions and those times of feeling nervous or upset. And it was around this time that I had a number of big disappointments in my life. One was the fact that I could no longer stay in Madison because of the big economic downturn in 2008, which is how I ended up in Greenville. A spoiler alert, that ended up being God too. But I never wanted to leave Madison. And it was God that cleared the way for me to come here. Every single step of the way, it was as if barriers were opened for me to know this was the right way to go. It was okay to leave. It was time to go. And the other thing that happened right around this time is that right after I moved to Greenville and after only 3 years of marriage, I got divorced from someone who I cared about a lot. I definitely did not feel at the time that God was behind that one when it happened, but during the time of healing afterwards, I often felt God's presence, and I felt like He brought me important people that I needed to heal during that time. Through these 2 very stressful years and another group of wise women who came into my life, I found the power of meditation, which some of you might call quiet prayer. This was the 3rd introduction of God into my life, and I believe for the first time that this might be the real God. Suddenly, God was no longer associated only with the hard times and someone who I called on when things got rough. For the first time ever, I actually felt the love and power of God, and it was immense, and it was so much more vast and so much different than I expected. The riddles that Jesus talks to the disciples in the Gospels had confounded me and had made no sense to me. Those suddenly started to make a little bit of sense to me, and I was surprised. And it was amazing, and it was wonderful, and those are really the only 2 words I can put to it. So around that same time, I also met Mike. And you might be able to sense this if you've met him, but Mike is a very wholesome and kind and sweet person. And if I was thinking that God is love and that God is good, Mike fit into God's plan for me. For instance, on our first date, Mike asked me to meet his parents, which I thought was very different than anyone I had met before. And he would ask me to listen to recordings of sermons that he had, and he asked me about God. And I tried to talk to him about what I found in meditation. He too was young and divorced, and he had all but stopped attending church as well. And over time, we decided to look for a church together and attended a few places that didn't fit. I knew that we would know when we found the right place, and I knew I wanted to find a church that had music. I wanted to find a church that was kind of a blend between traditional and contemporary, but not wholly contemporary with a rock band up front. And lastly, and most importantly, since most churches aren't based in silent meditation, I wanted to see love at work in the church we found. I have been impressed the times that Amanda has tried meditation with our large group, though. So thank you for that, Amanda. Very high on my list in relation to this feeling that I wanted to see love at work was that I couldn't imagine joining a church that was not open and accepting. These are 2 of my deepest values in life. Did this church accept LGBT people? Were they accepting LGBT people, or were they not talking about it, not making gay people fully part of the church? Did they accept people of more than one race, for instance? And by the time we found First Presbyterian, we were also expecting Anson, and so we were looking for a place with a great kids program. These are all the things that I love about First Presbyterian. I have not been able to be as active as I wanted to be as a member of this church, since our time with this church has also coincided with the busiest time of my entire life, and both as a young mother and in my career. 2 times I was asked to be an elder for the church, and both of those times I said I would do it in the future, and I regret that now. I have loved the music and loved music in general as for my whole life, as a spiritual thing, even as a young child. And I can feel music being meditative, and that's something that I see at First Presbyterian as well that I love. So in a moment, I'm going to sing you one of my favorite songs from church, and you'll have to excuse me because I don't have any instruments to play them for you besides my voice. Unlike that church in Madison that sent me a typewritten letter declining my offer to be a member, we have been accepted here with love and genuine care. The people at the 8:30 service all know us, and we all know them and care about them. Whether it's Mary lending me a book or Georgianne offering to cook extra food for Melody's baptism, this place feels like a giant hug to us. It's been painful to know that we're not going to say goodbye to each and every one of you as we leave First Presbyterian to move to Connecticut. It's more than a little daunting to think of how we're going to find a church that can even measure up to this one and find something that fits like First Pres. We're sending you love, mad love. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. We love you, First Pres. We'll miss you. Bye.